Welcome to 3 in 30, a podcast to help you feel more like yourself within your motherhood. Each 30-minute episode features 3 actionable takeaways to help you become a more self-assured mom, someone who knows yourself, honors your needs, and loves your people. Listen in to feel encouraged as we learn together how to overcome overwhelm and find more magic in motherhood. I'm your host, Rachel Nielsen. I'm so glad you're here. For as long as I can remember, I've been a sucker for personality quizzes and profiling systems, anything that helps me understand myself and others more deeply. I think this probably started with taking quizzes in teen magazines with my friends while growing up in the 90s. And even now into adulthood, I love learning about the way that I and others think and the differences between how we all move through the world. My favorite personality profiling system right now is the Enneagram, which is a psychological and spiritual model of understanding the human psyche through 9 interconnected personality types. And I'm thrilled to have an expert guest on the podcast today to give us an introduction to this fascinating methodology. Kelsey Lincoln has a BA in Youth and Community Studies, a Master's in Intercultural Studies, and an Enneagram coaching certification. She works with clients one-on-one and as couples to help them discover why they think, feel, and behave the way they do. As Kelsey says in this interview, when you understand yourself deeply, you can understand others deeply. I am so excited to dive into this conversation about how the Enneagram can help us to improve our relationships. So let's dive in. Kelsey, welcome to 3 in 30. I am so excited to have you here to talk about the Enneagram.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I have loved learning about the Enneagram over the last few years. It's made a big difference in my relationships, and I'm kind of
Mhm.
surprised that I've never brought it to the podcast yet. But I think the
Yeah,
reason why is because it does feel big. And
right.
so I wasn't sure how to bring it and narrow it to 30 minutes, but we're just
I
going to
know.
give everybody an introduction today and then
Yes,
they can dive in deeper if they want. So
totally.
let me just start by asking you, what is the Enneagram if this is the first time people are hearing about it?
Yes. So there are obviously a lot of personality tools out there. Like you've probably heard of Myers-Briggs or DISC assessment, right? Those kind of things. The Enneagram is in that same vein, but it's different because it gets to the why behind what we do. So it goes beyond just our behaviors and are you extroverted? Are you introverted? And goes to our actual motivations in life for why we do things. And so it's a personality tool that tells us why we think, feel, and behave in certain ways. And there's actually 9 different types. And all of those 9 types have what we call core motivations, and they're set up into 4 things. So, core fears, what are you always trying to get away from? Core desires, what are you always trying to gain in life and go for and want more of? Our core weakness, which is kind of maybe that main theme that keeps coming up that you're like, ugh, why does this always show up in my life? And then our core longing, which is kind of like, what did your little kid brain and heart need to hear when you were young? And how does that still show up in us as adults? So
Mm.
that's like a very brief overview. We also have wings, which give us I like to say flavor to our type. So they're the numbers to our left and right. But yeah, that's kind of how it's made up.
Yeah. It's been so interesting for me, yeah, just to learn about the basic 9 types
Mhm.
and to start thinking about and figuring out where I fit and then also where my husband fit has been really eye-opening. And there's many, many books written on this. You have a whole coaching certification you've done on this. So again, we're not going to be able to get into all of the nitty-gritty, but I would love if you could just give like a 1 to 2 sentence summary of each of the 9 types to give people some context before we get into our takeaways.
Yes, okay. So each one of these 9 types has, a different name, if you will. Based on different teachers, you can kind of get a different name. So, if you don't like my name, there's another one out there. But so type 1s are the reformer. Some people refer to it as a perfectionist because they're just very concerned with, right or wrong, good and bad. They're very black and white thinkers. They're very concerned with having high morals and values in life, and so it might be a little more rigid, right, than other types. They are stereotypically like that kind of clean freak and everything has to be in order. But actually, I like to tell people, it doesn't have to be that their house is perfectly clean for some ones. A lot of ones, it's actually that it's more concerned with that moral perfectionism. So
Mm.
that's kind of the biggest theme for them.
Mhm.
So that's ones. Twos are our befriender or the helper, and they are very much like the stereotypical best friend or warm person in your life. They have tons of relationships. They're very motivated by others, and so they a lot of times are giving of themselves a lot, which is kind of where that helper comes in. And sometimes that's a detriment actually to themselves. And so they neglect self a lot because they're these helpers and givers, and but which is such a great thing, and all of these 9 types have such positive qualities, and there are hard things about each type too. So,
Mhm.
that's type 2. Type 3 is the achiever, and they're very driven by success. They always wanna, like, present well and be the best at things, and that looks different for some 3s. Some 3s, that means, like, they're workaholics in different corporations or whatever their job is, but some that's maybe in the home and wanting to have the best home and be the best
Mhm.
dressed, right? So they present kind of this persona that they want to be accepted and they think the world accepts. And a lot of times, like they're not showing their authentic self. And so they can kind of hide behind that mask, if you will.
Mhm.
Our fours are kind of the more romantic individualist, and they're actually probably the most creative on the Enneagram is the stereotype. And a lot of times that is true. And creativity can look different for all of them. I always tell people, like, it doesn't have to be you're an artist specifically, or music. It can be, you're in the kitchen baking, or you're like a party planner, or you're super creative in whatever your corporate job is. Like, it doesn't have to look like stereotypical creativity that we think about. But yes, they just have that imaginary mind. And because of that, they often, like, idealize a lot, and they can compare themselves to others, and they actually want to stand out and be unique, but that kind
Mhm.
of makes them then realize what they lack a lot, and so they have a lot of internal strife and struggle, and they're also the most emotional types on the Enneagram and can go from really high highs to really low lows, which makes them, like, so beautiful in so many ways. They're so complex, but it could be hard in the way that they also deal with melancholy and sadness, and they, like, feel things to the depths.
Mhm.
So those are our 4s. Our
Mhm.
5s are the investigator, and they are kind of the most cerebral type on the Enneagram. They live in their heads, they want to research and know everything, like gaining knowledge is power to them. And so having all the resources mentally that they can makes them feel safe. They also a lot of times are known to be kind of an isolator, and they need a lot of space. Sometimes that makes it hard for them to connect with others. And they really have to like find that balance of being in relationship, but also getting their needs met by being alone. But they're very, yeah, curious about life and things. So those are our
Mhm.
5s. Our 6s are the loyalist, and they are also they can be kind of like a 2 in the sense that they're very warm and have a lot of friends and people. They're very community oriented. They really want to, like, make sure the group is all good, but that a lot of times causes them to have, like, fear and doubt in themselves, so a lot of times they can doubt, who they are and their desires and wants and needs. They also are kind of our biggest worriers on the Enneagram. So there are what if and worst case scenario thinkers, where they can just kind of like catastrophize or project into the future their fears and worries. And that becomes like a big struggle for them.
Mhm.
Struggle with anxiety a lot, and that can be either, like, diagnosed, anxiety or just kind of how we all talk about that fear that we experience. So, yeah, they're more fearful, but they also are, like, very loyal. When they're on your team, they'll do anything for their people, for their companies, for whatever. So, our 7s, they are the enthusiast, and they're just kind of the stereotypical life of the party. Again, kinda like a 5 is more introverted, the 7s are usually more extroverted. Doesn't mean you can't be, it just means that they, are more designed that way a lot of times, and so they love to be, like, positive, upbeat, adventurers, wanna, like, be go-getters and do all the things that are fun. A lot of times, though, that means they're avoiding what's hard, and they avoid what's maybe something negative in their life, and they just wanna do whatever's positive and fun to avoid that pain that they may experience. Those are our 7s. Our 8s are the challengers, and again, more stereotypical, the most intense on the Enneagram. They deal with a lot of anger, and they're just very powerful, and they are fierce in what they believe and think and how they move in the world. If you know at 8, you probably know because you can sense their presence,
Mm,
and sometimes that comes off as, like, too much and too intense and hurtful to others, but a lot of times they also are, like, fierce and loyal people that will do anything for their teammates, for their partners. If you're on an 8's team, like, they're gonna do anything for you, so
mhm. And a
those
lot of,
are
like, social justice warriors, I feel
oh,
like,
yeah,
are
very
yeah.
justice oriented, yep,
Mhm.
want to fight for the underdog, but that makes them fearful of being, like, weak or vulnerable to others, and so that can be hard
Mm.
for them.
Mm.
Kinda hide behind that tough exterior. And then our 9s, and they are peacemakers, so they're kind of the most, like, easy to get along with, easygoing, kind, humble people. That is mostly so great, but because of that, they often, like, lose sense of themselves, and so they don't always know what they want and what they think, and they don't always share their opinions and put them and assert themselves out there because they're kind of just going along with whatever anyone else wants to keep peace and avoid conflict or tension, and because they don't wanna lose relationship with others, so that's a
Mm.
very quick and
Yeah.
brief overview of all those 9 types, but there's so
Mhm.
much to all of them that I didn't even get to.
Yeah. Well, that was great. From what I know about the Enneagram, you nailed it. Um,
Thanks.
and I do love what you said earlier that you mentioned that you have a wing, so the numbers that are right around your main number influence your type. So, like,
Exactly.
I'm a 2, but I have
Mhm.
a really strong 3 wing. In fact, I sometimes I'm like, "Am I a 3? Am I a 2?" I've settled on
Totally, yeah.
I'm pretty sure I'm a 2, but that 3 definitely pulls, and
Yes.
influences me a lot, and I'm sure the 1 does as well. I think my 3 is stronger than my 1, but it's just interesting to start to unpack and understand yourself better and the people around you, which is what we're gonna talk about in this episode with
Mhm.
these takeaways, is once you sort of figured out their main type, you can start to understand them better and
Right.
communicate with them better, and I
Mhm.
think that is a great lead into what is your first takeaway for how the Enneagram can help us to improve our relationships?
So, our relationships are, I feel like, only gonna be as good as we are at, how we are with ourselves individually, right? Like, how
Mhm.
healthy we are and how much we know ourselves. And so what the Enneagram does, our first takeaway, is it helps us understand ourselves and others, like, as simple as that, right? But that's so vague in some way, but at the same time, like, when you understand yourself deeply, and you can also understand others deeply because you can interact in healthier ways, you have more compassion for others because you've probably had to deal with your own stuff a lot, and you're like, "Okay, I understand, like, myself so much and my the icky parts of me and the hard things about me, and so now I can have more compassion for that of others. When we understand, like, our internal world, and the Enneagram really breaks that down for us and just, like, on paper in some ways, which is so nice that we can, you know, kind of, like, read about ourselves and be like, "Yes, yes, yes," you know? And
Mhm.
of course, I always say, like, it's not putting you in a box, it's not exactly who you are, of course. We all have those stories and childhoods that influence all these things. But once you understand yourself and your behaviors and why you do those things you do, then you're going to just understand and have more empathy for those you're in relationship with.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I feel like it helps me to sort of self-confront, like, as a
Yeah.
2, one of the weaknesses of 2s is that you can be kind of a martyr, or you can
Yeah.
like, you give, 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 but then you expect it in return, so there
Mhm.
can sort of be this underlying selfishness, really,
Yeah.
and so it's good for me to be able to call myself out when I'm, like,
Yes.
feeling unappreciated by somebody, and then I think, "Oh, you're too showing, Rachel." Like, did you do that
Yes.
service? Did you serve that person because you genuinely wanted to, or because there was this
Mhm.
underlying thing
Your
that you
hidden
wanted?
motivation.
Yes, and so it helps me to take a step back and realize, "Oh, this person isn't trying to hurt me. I'm just maybe a little bit more emotionally needy than, like,
Yes.
my type 5
Yeah.
husband who is, like, a totally different." Like, 2s and 5s are
They're opposites. Yeah.
incredibly different, and so it's helped me to understand that,
Mhm.
and to sort of call myself out and understand him better with his motivations.
Yeah, exactly. And I have a client who, had a really hard time with the relationship with her mom, and it wasn't necessarily, like, toxic or really intense, it was just, like, we were always on 2 different, like, planets a little bit, and
Mm,
when she started doing work with me and understanding herself better, she could then understand her mom because she knew her mom's type, and she was
mm,
like, "Oh, now I understand the why behind why she's doing these things." And it
mm,
just, like, immediately fuels this empathy, and not that it fixes the issue, of course, right? Because people have to do their work, but and you have to do your own work, but I just think it, like, brings a whole new meaning to an issue you're having with someone if you can understand, like, "Oh, I can take ownership for what I'm doing and why, but I also understand, like, there's more going on of why they're doing these things versus just the behavior I'm seeing,"
mhm.
you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's take a quick break to thank this episode's sponsors. Support for today's episode comes from OneSkin, skincare products formulated with OS1, the first ingredient scientifically proven to reverse skin's biological age at the molecular level. I'm sure you've probably noticed that skin goes through a lot during different stages of life: melasma, dry skin, hormonal breakouts. I really thought that by the time I was a 40-year-old woman, I wouldn't be getting zits anymore, but that still happens for me during certain times of the month. Today's sponsor, OneSkin, has products that are so easy to use and so effective that even sleep deprived parents can make it happen. It works by addressing skin issues at the cellular level. I love my simple skincare routine using OneSkin's OS1 Topical Face Supplement Essential Moisturizer and the OS1 Eye Topical Supplement. It's quick and the products feel luxurious on my face. I love that OneSkin was founded by a team of 4 scientists who are all women, and they are committed to developing solutions to prolong human health span. OneSkin is the world's first skin longevity company. By focusing on the cellular aspects of aging, OneSkin keeps your skin looking and acting younger for longer. Get started today with 15% off using code 3 in 30 at oneskin.co. That's 15% off oneskin.co with code 3 in 30. After you purchase, they'll ask where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Summer is in full swing around here, my friends. If you've been swept up in the transition from school to being home, or school to summer camps, or even just the weather heating up, I want to remind you to prioritize your well being. For me, this looks like making time for a walk so I can get time by myself, and also meeting regularly with a therapist. Sometimes meeting regularly means once a week, and right now it looks like every couple of months. Either way, I'm so grateful for the guidance of a professional counselor, someone I can check in with as a sounding board for life's moving parts and transitions. If you want to try meeting with a therapist, I highly recommend BetterHelp. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your unique schedule, done all online. Fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. I know that getting started or even starting back up again if you've moved or had a life change can sometimes be the hardest part. So I want to make sure you know that you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. If you're feeling overwhelmed or burned out right now, take a moment. Visit betterhelp.com/3 in 30 today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/3 in 30. This podcast is also sponsored by Lumi Deodorant, whole body deodorant that is truly safe to use anywhere on your body. Since vacation season is officially in full swing, I want to take a second to talk about something that I just can't live without. It's my second set of toiletries that is always packed and ready to go. I travel frequently for work and with my family, and I just don't want to be making decisions about what toiletries to pack or risk forgetting something important. One of the products that I can't live without is my Lumi deodorant. In past summers, when the heat cranks up, I'm often left wondering if my deodorant is even working. But thanks to Lumi's deodorant stick, that's not the case this year. I'm feeling more confident than ever, and I'm so looking forward to summer adventures with my family. No matter where you use it, Lumi is clinically proven to block odor all day long for up to 72 hours. And the reviews speak for themselves. There's over 275,000 five-star reviews. Lumi Starter Pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers get $5 off a Lumi Starter Pack with code 3 in 30 at lumideodorant.com. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack when you visit lumideodorant.com, Lume deodorant.com, and use code 3 in 30. Then what's your second takeaway for us?
So, It gives us a roadmap to handle conflict and communication. And there's so many layers to the Enneagram. Beyond just knowing your type, you have other types you're connected to, and you go to these types when you're in stress. So, like, you don't become these other types, but you definitely pull from behaviors and actions of another type. And when you can understand what you're like in stress and like what sets you off and what triggers you based on what someone's saying or, how they're communicating, it is so helpful because you can really start to address like, "Oh, I'm hearing this as you're telling me I'm a terrible person." Well, that's kind of on myself when someone's not actually saying that, it's on me to really uncover and understand they're not actually saying that. That's how I'm hearing it based on my own issues and my
Mm,
own childhood messages or whatever I need to address based on my type, right? So like you said, like if you're a 2 and you fear rejection, if someone is like fighting with you, you might feel like they're rejecting you, but really they're just trying to like come to a different conclusion with you. And so if you
mm,
can understand that and how they're communicating, how you're communicating, it can help so much. In the Enneagram, each types do different things during conflict. So like some will
mm,
withdraw and some will kind of go at the person, right? And even when you can break down those things and understand that, it's so helpful. Like I had a married couple that I was coaching and they had the same fight over and over. And once they realized like, oh, it's because you're a 9 and you withdraw when you're in conflict and you wanna run, and I wanna come towards you in this
mm,
argument.
mm,
That's not helping. It's never getting us anywhere, and then we just get mad at each other for doing those things. So once they understood why they were doing those things, they could actually resolve conflict better because they were like, "Okay, no, you need space in this moment," or, "I know that you need answers, so I'm gonna come back to you and tell you I just need time for a little bit," right? Like, just communicating and trying to resolve that conflict quickly because you know all these things about your type. Whereas like before they just kept getting stuck, you
mm,
know?
yeah. I do feel like with all different sort of personality profiling systems, people do sometimes resist because they feel like you're saying that all human beings in the entire world fit in 9 categories, and that's
Right.
putting me in a box. And that's not at all what you're saying here because we are all impacted by our wing numbers, by our
Mhm.
upbringings, by the context, all of that. But it gives you a starting place. And that's
Yes.
what I love about it is, like, when I read about a 2, it's not like every single thing that I read fits me,
Of
but
course.
quite a bit of it does. And so it
Right.
gives me a starting place for understanding myself or understanding my Enneagram 5 husband, who is honestly a mystery to me. I've been married to him for almost 19 years,
Right.
and, like, reading this 5 profile, I'm like, "Oh, yes,
Right.
yes, yes." And it's not like, "And now I never need to learn anything else about Ryan because this one sheet paper summed it up."
Of
Of
course.
course not, but it gives me a starting place to
Mhm.
understand that is how he prefers to communicate. Oh, type 5s fear incompetence, and so that's
Mhm.
why sometimes he doesn't want to jump into something or take action until he's sure that he's competent on it, and I'm thinking like, "Let's go, come on."
Yeah.
And so just reading that has given me a lot more understanding and helped with our communication and our conflict, just having that starting point of sort of understanding his
Yes.
number.
Exactly, and I think I always say, like, it gives you a common language. Like,
Mhm.
my husband and I will use it to, like, explain things we're feeling in a moment, like, "Hey, I'm feeling in my fiveness," or, "I'm feeling in my sixness," like, of, you know, incompetence or whatever it is that you're struggling with based on your type, right? You now
Mhm.
have, like, kind of a little, box, a toolbox that you can just pull out of and say, "This is how I'm feeling based on who I am and how I'm made up."
Mm.
Whereas some people just really struggle with, like, to explain what's going on, kinda gives you that roadmap, right?
Yeah, it gives you that starting place to be able to even start to explore, get curious about your unique makeup.
Right.
I think that's so true. And then what's your 3rd takeaway for us?
Okay, so it just really helps us tells us how to grow, and that's what I love about this based on other personality assessments that you would take. They kind of just give you this rundown of how you're like, and they don't always say, "Well, you can actually change these behaviors. You can change these things about yourself, and here's how." And, like, here's a helpful tool to help you grow and become healthier. And so that's what I love about it is it doesn't just say, like, "This is who you are, stay here." It says, "Hey, you're kind of this way, here's why, but also here's these types you're connected to, and I want you to like pull from those in healthy ways and learn from those other types learn how to get tools to grow out of certain behaviors that you may be doing your whole life and move towards your becoming a healthier version of yourself. It really gives you that guide to say, like, in stress and in health, here's where I can pull from to become better.
Yeah, and I love too just the idea that there's different sort of levels within each type of healthy versus unhealthy, because
Yes.
when you read about your number and you read about some of the weaknesses and things, you might be like, ugh, like I don't want to be that
Mhm.
number. I don't want to be
Mhm.
this number. I don't want to be somebody that's only giving because of this like ulterior motive because I'm a two. But that's
Mhm.
actually not what a healthy 2 looks like, and so you
Right.
realize, like, "Oh, I can see that in myself, and also I can see the moments when I have been the higher version of a 2, where I have
Totally.
given from the best of myself," and that's what I'm moving towards is sort of the
Yes.
highest version of this
Yeah, and
number.
it's a roller coaster, right? But it always, like, helps us pinpoint those warning signs. "Hey, you're in this path, like, you're in this stress part of your type, like, what can you do? Here's some things you can do to become more out of that type in a healthier version," right?
Mm,
And if we can get to the why behind we do things, right, not just observing our behavior and staying there,
mm,
I think that's gonna help us grow individually, which in return will help us grow with others.
absolutely. So, Kelsey, as people are listening, if they're wondering where they can start, they're wondering what their Enneagram number is, what are
Mhm.
next steps for these listeners?
Yes, so I always say it's a journey, like, people kind of wanna just take the test and figure out their type, and that is a great starting place. It can be, but it also can be very confusing to find your type, and that's okay. But the first step is to identify your type because the Enneagram is not helpful if you don't know what type you are.
Mhm,
So, how you can do that is, yes, you can take a test, a free test online if you want. They're just not that accurate, so just take it with a grain of salt. I always say another way to do that is to read through all 9 types. So you can go online anywhere. You can look at my Instagram page, which we'll probably get to in the show notes, but you
mhm,
can you can look there and just kind of almost self-assess what you are, or you can also schedule a session with me. I offer discover sessions where I help you figure out your type, and it may sound super easy to figure out, but once you get into it, it may not be for some people.
mhm.
So you can reach out to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I just wanna speak to the fact that sometimes an online test isn't my husband mistyped for a long time as a 9.
Mhm.
The online test said he was a 9, and a lot of it fit, but it was funny
Mhm.
because when we read it, there was always just some aspects of it that weren't quite right.
Right.
And I was listening to a podcast where an Enneagram coach like you listed off, like, a definition of each type, and I thought I knew the Enneagram pretty well.
Yeah.
And when he described the 5, I was like, "Ryan's a 5. Ryan's a 5." Like,
It
all of
just
a
hit
sudden, it,
you.
like, came to me, and I, like, texted him, and I'm like, "I want you to read it and tell me if you think you're a 5."
Yeah.
And he, like, read it over, and he's like, "Yes." And it just felt like it, like, unlocked
Mm,
so much for us, and so
yes.
I think having a coach or somebody sort of talk you through it and help you figure it out, especially if the type that you're given online doesn't quite you're like, it's not quite right. Somebody who has
Right.
more understanding of the Enneagram can kinda help you figure it out. So,
Yes.
I love that
Absolutely.
you offer those services. So, your Instagram is Enneagram with Kelsey. Is that also your website as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Website as well, and then I have actually a podcast as well. It's, paired with my sister, and we talk about Enneagram and mental health, so we kinda pair those things, and
Oh,
it's called
perfect.
Related, the podcast, and it's Caitlin and Kelsey. So, you can
Alright,
research there and find some other discussions like this. So, yeah.
perfect. Well, thank you so much, Kelsey, for coming on and giving us this introduction to the Enneagram, and I know people are gonna wanna dive in deeper after hearing, and we're
Yes, I
so
hope so.
glad you came on 3 and 30.
Thanks for having me.
I loved that brief introduction to the Enneagram, and I hope you're feeling inspired to learn more about this powerful personality profiling system. You may be feeling resistant to the idea that you could possibly fit into one of 9 personality types. But remember that this is just a starting place to help you uncover some of your motivations. And doing this kind of self reflection can bless all of your relationships in at least 3 ways. First, the Enneagram can help you to understand yourself and others, which leads to more empathy and less judgment. As Kelsey said in our conversation, our relationships are only going to be as good as we are at understanding ourselves individually. And the Enneagram is a fantastic starting place to better understand your fears, desires, weaknesses, and longings. When you understand why you're doing something or why your partner, friend, or family member is doing it, it breeds so much more compassion than just witnessing someone's behavior. It also gives you common language to discuss your motivations, which leads to takeaway number 2. The Enneagram can give us a roadmap for how we handle conflict and communication. When you dive into the Enneagram, you'll learn how each type reacts to stress, what they fear, what they long for, and more. And all of this will make you much more skilled at communicating with the unique people in your life, as well as noticing your own responses to others' communication styles. This can be a game changer when it comes to navigating conflict. And third and finally, the Enneagram shows us how we can grow healthier as individuals and couples. I love that Kelsey pointed out that the Enneagram isn't just about understanding yourself so you can stay the same. It's about understanding yourself so you can grow within your type, and also by working to acquire some of the strengths of other connected types. An emotionally healthy version of your Enneagram number will look very different from an emotionally unhealthy version of your Enneagram number. And having that all spelled out will give you a way to self-assess and start working on the areas where you want to grow. All in all, learning about the Enneagram has been fascinating for me, and it has helped me to understand myself and others better. I think it's an incredible relationships tool, and I encourage you to get in touch with Kelsey through enneagramwithkelsey.com if you want to do a deeper dive into why you do what you do and how it impacts those around you. As always, my friends, I'm rooting for you. I hope you are thriving in these summer months with your kiddos around more often, and I hope you have a beautiful week with your family.